His last wish before execution. To see his dog, but what happened changed everything. With just 18 hours left before his scheduled execution, Alfred Rodriguez made a request that stunned even the most hardened prison guards. He didn't want a final meal, a phone call to family, or a visit from clergy. He wanted to see Rusty, the golden retriever he'd raised from a puppy, the only witness to a crime he swore he didn't commit. What happened when that dog entered the death row facility would shake the very foundations of justice and reveal a truth so shocking that it would change multiple lives forever. The fluorescent lights in Block D of Millfield State Penitentiary hummed with their usual electric buzz, but that Tuesday morning felt different. The air seemed thicker, weighted with the knowledge that in less than 24 hours, Alfred Rodriguez would take his final walk down the corridor that prisoners called the last mile. Alfred sat on the edge of his narrow cot, staring at his hands that the state of Texas claimed had committed murder, hands that he knew were innocent. 7 years on death row had aged him beyond his 35 years. His once thick black hair was now streaked with silver, and deep lines etched his face like a roadmap of sleepless nights and broken dreams. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the cell block. Warden Patricia Hayes appeared at his cell door, clipboard in hand, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes betraying a hint of the weight she carried. This was never the easy part of her job. "Rodriguez," she said, her voice steady but not unkind. "Time for your final requests. What would you like for your last meal?" Marcus looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time in months. "I don't want a meal, Warden." Hayes raised an eyebrow. In her 15 years overseeing executions, she'd heard requests for everything from lobster and champagne to simple hamburgers and fries. Some men wanted elaborate feasts, others wanted nothing at all, but the refusal usually came with an alternative request. "All right," she said, making a note. "Would you like to make any phone calls? Write any final letters?" "No, ma'am." The warden waited. There was always something. A final confession, a message to family, a request for a particular song to be played. Something to help them feel human in their final hours. Marcus took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I want to see my dog." The request hung in the air like smoke. Hayes blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "Rusty," Marcus said, louder now, with more conviction. "I want to see my dog, Rusty. He's the only family I have left." The warden stared at him, her pen frozen above the clipboard. In all her years, she'd never heard this request. A dog. A condemned man's final wish was to see a dog. "Rodriguez, you know that's not standard protocol. We can't bring animals into a maximum security facility, especially not onto death row." "Please?" The word came out broken, desperate. "He's all I have. He's been staying at Golden Years Animal Sanctuary since my arrest. They've been taking care of him all these years, waiting for me to come home." Marcus's voice cracked. "He doesn't know I'm never coming home." Something in his tone made Hayes pause. She'd seen men break down in these final hours, some begging for mercy, others raging against their fate, many simply withdrawing into themselves. But this felt different. This wasn't desperation or manipulation. This was pure, raw love. I'll see what I can do," she heard herself saying, though she knew it was likely impossible. An hour later, Warden Hayes sat in her office, staring at Marcus Rodriguez's file spread across her desk. The case had always troubled her, though she'd never allowed herself to dwell on doubts. That wasn't her job. Her job was to carry out the sentences handed down by the courts, not to question them. But now, looking at the request to see his dog, she found herself reading through the details again. Alfred had been convicted of murdering his neighbor, Elena Vasquez, a 73-year-old widow who lived alone next door to his small rental house. The prosecution had painted him as a desperate man who'd broken into her home looking for money to feed his drug habit. The evidence seemed solid, his fingerprints on a broken window, his DNA on a kitchen knife found at the scene, and testimony from another neighbor who claimed to have seen Alfred leaving Elena's house around the time of the murder. The jury had deliberated for less than 6 hours, but there were details that had never quite fit. Alfred had no history of violence, no previous arrests, and every character witness testified to his gentle nature with animals and elderly neighbors. Elena herself had apparently trusted him. He'd done yard work for her, helped with groceries, even had a key to check on her when she was ill. And then, there was the dog. Rusty had been found locked in Alfred's bathroom the morning of the arrest, whining and scratching at the door. The prosecution claimed Alfred had locked him away to prevent him from interfering with the crime, but Alfred insisted he'd never locked Rusty in the bathroom. The dog slept on his bed every night and had free run of the house. Hayes picked up her phone and dialed the number for Golden Years Animal Sanctuary. "This is Warden Hayes at Millfield State Penitentiary. I need to speak to someone about a dog named Rusty." 3 hours later, a beat-up van pulled through the prison's main gate. Behind the wheel sat Deora Chen, director of Golden Years Animal Sanctuary, her weathered hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. In the passenger seat, a golden retriever with graying fur around his muzzle looked out the window with alert brown eyes. Deora had been caring for Rusty for 7 years, ever since the day the police had called asking if she could take in a dog whose owner had been arrested. She'd expected Alfred to be released after a few days, maybe weeks. She never imagined she'd be bringing Rusty to say goodbye forever. "I know this is hard, boy," she whispered to the dog, reaching over to stroke his head. "But he needs to see you. He needs to know you're okay." Rusty had never stopped waiting for Alfred to come home. For the first year, he'd sit by the sanctuary's front door every evening at 5 o'clock, the time Alfred used to return from work. Even now, 7 years later, his tail would wag hopefully whenever Deora picked up her keys, as if this time, she might be taking him back to his real home. The van stopped at the main security checkpoint, and Sarah felt her heart racing. She'd never imagined she'd be bringing a dog into a prison, let alone for such a heartbreaking purpose. "Ma'am, we'll need to do a security check on the animal," the guard said, approaching with a handheld metal detector. Rusty sat patiently as the device waved over his body, his training from years as Marcus's companion evident in his calm demeanor. Marcus had always been proud of how well-behaved Rusty was, how he could take him anywhere without worry. The security process took another hour. Forms to sign, liability waivers, special permissions from the Department of Corrections. Finally, a guard escorted Sarah and Rusty through a series of locked doors, each one clanging shut behind them with finality. "The inmate will be brought to the visitation yard," the guard explained. "He'll be restrained, but we're allowing physical contact with the animal under strict supervision. You have 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 7 years of separation, and they had 30 minutes. The visitation yard was a small, concrete-walled space with a few metal benches and a guard tower overlooking everything. It was where death row inmates met with their lawyers, said goodbye to family members, made their peace with the world. Today, it would witness something unprecedented. Alfred walked into the yard, flanked by 2 guards, his wrists and ankles shackled. He'd been given a clean orange jumpsuit for the occasion, and someone had allowed him to shower and shave. But none of that mattered the moment he saw the golden shape sitting patiently next to a woman with kind eyes. "Rusty," he breathed, and the dog's head snapped up. For a heartbeat, neither moved. 7 years had passed. Alfred looked older, grayer, smaller somehow in his prison uniform. Rusty had aged too. His muzzle was white now, his movements slower. But then Rusty's tail began to wag, slowly at first, then faster, and Alfred felt tears streaming down his face as the years collapsed between them. The guards unlocked his restraints, and Alfred dropped to his knees just as Rusty bounded forward, all dignity forgotten in his joy. The dog crashed into Alfred's chest, nearly knocking him over, his whole body wiggling with excitement as he covered his human's face with kisses. "I'm sorry," Alfred sobbed, burying his face in Rusty's fur. "I'm so sorry, boy. I wanted to come home. I wanted to come home so bad." The guards, the warden, Even Diora found themselves wiping away tears as they watched the reunion. This wasn't just a man saying goodbye to his pet. This was love in its purest form, untainted by time or circumstances. For 20 minutes, Alfred held Rusty, whispering apologies and memories, telling him about the dreams he'd had of coming home, of their walks in the park, of quiet evenings on the couch watching television. Rusty seemed to understand every word, pressing closer as if trying to comfort the human who had always comforted him. But then something strange happened. Rusty's demeanor suddenly changed. His body went rigid, his ears pricked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Alfred felt the tension immediately. "What is it, boy?" he asked, following Rusty's gaze. The dog was staring intently at Officer Jake Morrison, one of the guards who had escorted Alfred to the yard. Morrison stood about 15 feet away, his hand resting casually on his belt, but his face had gone pale as he watched the dog's reaction. Rusty's growl deepened, his lips pulling back to show his teeth, something Alfred had only seen him do a handful of times in their 8 years together, and always when he sensed genuine danger. "Easy, boy," Alfred said softly, placing a calming hand on Rusty's back. But his mind was racing. Rusty had been with him the night of Elena's murder. The dog had been locked in the bathroom when the police arrived, but Alfred had always insisted he'd never put him there. What if someone else had? "Officer Morrison," Warden Hayes called from across the yard, having noticed the dog's reaction. "Is there a problem?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "No, ma'am, just dogs don't usually like the smell of the prison, I guess." But Rusty wasn't reacting to general prison smells. His focus was laser-sharp on Morrison specifically. Alfred studied the officer's face, searching his memory. There was something familiar about him, something that nagged at the edges of his consciousness. "Have we met before?" Alfred asked quietly. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Don't think so." "You sure? Because my dog here seems to know you, and Rusty's got a good memory for people he doesn't trust." The yard had gone quiet. Even the other guards were watching now, sensing the tension. Rusty remained on high alert, every muscle coiled, his eyes never leaving Morrison. Warden Hayes approached slowly. She'd been running prisons long enough to know that animals often sensed things humans missed. Dogs, in particular, were excellent judges of character. "Morrison, where were you the night of October 15th, 7 years ago?" she asked. I don't remember. That's a long time ago." "That was the night Elena Vasquez was murdered," Hayes said quietly. "The night Mr. Rodriguez was arrested." Morrison's face had gone from pale to gray. "I wasn't on duty that night. I was at home." But Diora, who had been watching the exchange with growing alarm, suddenly spoke up. "Wait a minute. I know you." All eyes turned to her. She was staring at Morrison with recognition dawning in her eyes. "You came to the sanctuary about a year ago, asking about Rusty. You said you were thinking about adopting him, that you'd heard he was a good dog. But when I brought him out to meet you, he had the same reaction, growling, backing away. I thought it was strange, because Rusty usually loves everyone." Morrison took a step backward, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. But Warden Hayes was already motioning for backup, and within seconds, additional guards had surrounded him. "Let's all stay calm," Hayes said firmly. "Morrison, I think we need to have a conversation." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Morrison was escorted to an interrogation room, while Alfred was returned to his cell. The execution temporarily postponed pending investigation. Rusty remained at the prison, officially designated as evidence, though really he'd become something much more important. A key witness to a crime. Dr. Patricia Vance, a forensic expert specializing in animal behavior, was called in to evaluate the situation. She'd worked with police dogs for years and had testified in several cases where animals had provided crucial evidence. "Dogs have an olfactory memory that's roughly 40 times stronger than humans," she explained to the assembled investigators. "If this dog encountered Officer Morrison at the scene of the crime 7 years ago, he would absolutely remember his scent. The aggressive reaction we're seeing is consistent with a dog protecting its territory or owner from a perceived threat. Meanwhile, Investigators were digging into Morrison's background. What they found sent shockwaves through the department. Morrison had been having an affair with Elena Vasquez's niece, Carmen, who lived in another state. Elena had discovered the affair and threatened to expose it, which would have cost Morrison his job and his marriage. On the night of the murder, Morrison had gone to Elena's house to plead with her to keep quiet. Phone records showed calls between Morrison and Carmen on the night of the murder, and a subsequent wire transfer of $50,000 from Elena's bank account to an account linked to Carmen. Money that was supposed to buy her silence, but instead bought her cooperation in covering up her lover's crime. But the most damning evidence came when investigators re-examined the crime scene. Hidden in Elena's house, behind a loose floorboard that had been missed during the original investigation, they found a recording device that Elena had installed to document Morrison's threats. The recording was crystal clear. Morrison's voice, demanding that Elena stay quiet about his affair, threatening her when she refused, and finally the sounds of a struggle that ended with Elena's death. The timestamp showed that Alfred had been at work during the entire incident, with dozens of witnesses and security cameras to prove it. Morrison had killed Elena, then rushed to Alfred's house where he knew the young man kept a spare key. He'd planted evidence, locked Rusty in the bathroom to prevent the dog from interfering, and then made an anonymous call to police reporting suspicious activity at Elena's house. The plan had worked perfectly, except for one detail Morrison hadn't counted on. Dogs never forget. 3 days later, Alfred Rodriguez walked out of Millfield State Penitentiary, a free man. The media was waiting, cameras flashing as he emerged into the sunlight for the first time in 7 years. But Alfred only had eyes for the golden retriever waiting beside the sanctuary van. Rusty seemed to know immediately that this time was different. His tail wagged so hard his entire body shook as Alfred approached. And when they embraced, there was no sadness in it, only pure joy. "We're going home, boy," Alfred whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We're really going home." The legal system moved quickly to make amends. Alfred received a substantial settlement from the state, enough to buy a small house with a large yard where he and Rusty could make up for lost time. Officer Jake Morrison was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But perhaps the most important outcome was the change in protocol that Warden Hayes instituted at Millfield. No longer would condemned inmates be denied the right to see their beloved pets in their final hours. She'd learned something important from Alfred Rodriguez's case. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected sources. 6 months later, Alfred stood in the backyard of his new home, throwing a tennis ball for Rusty, who still ran with the enthusiasm of a puppy despite his advancing years. The dog would chase the ball, bring it back, and look up at Alfred with pure adoration, as if every moment together was a gift. And it was. They both knew how close they'd come to losing each other forever, how a single moment of doubt, a dog's loyalty, and a series of fortunate coincidences had changed everything. The phone rang and Alfred jogged inside to answer it, Rusty at his heels as always. It was Diora from the sanctuary. "Alfred, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I have a situation here. There's a man on death row in Arizona, scheduled for execution next month. His lawyer contacted me after hearing about your case. His final request is to see his cat." Alfred smiled, looking down at Rusty, who had settled at his feet with the tennis ball still in his mouth. "Tell me more about it," he said. "Maybe we can help." Because if Marcus had learned anything from his experience, it was that love and loyalty could move mountains, or in his case, they could overturn a wrongful conviction and save an innocent life. And if there was another person out there facing death for a crime they didn't commit, another beloved pet waiting for a reunion that might never come, well, Marcus and Rusty were going to do everything in their power to help. The truth, after all, had a way of revealing itself when you least expected it. Sometimes it came through evidence, sometimes through witnesses, and sometimes through the unwavering loyalty of a golden retriever who never stopped believing in the innocence of the man he loved. As night fell, Alfred sat on his porch with Rusty's head in his lap, both of them watching the stars come out over their new home. They'd lost 7 years together, but they had all the time in the world to make new memories. And somewhere in Arizona, a man named Robert was writing a letter to his lawyer, asking if they'd heard about a case in Texas where a dog had helped prove an innocent man's innocence. Because Robert had a cat named Whiskers, and if this was his last chance to see her, maybe, just maybe, that reunion might reveal the truth he'd been trying to tell for 8 years. The power of love, after all, knows no bounds, not prison walls, not the passage of time, and certainly not the limitations of species. Sometimes the most important witness to the truth walks on 4 legs and speaks with actions rather than words. What did you think of this incredible story of loyalty and justice? Have you ever experienced the unwavering devotion of a beloved pet that sees the truth when others cannot? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you about these remarkable tales of love conquering all odds. If stories like this touch your heart and remind you of the special bond between humans and animals, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most amazing, heartwarming, and unbelievable true stories from around the world. Tales that prove love and loyalty can overcome even the darkest circumstances. Ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of hope, justice, and the incredible connections that bind us to the creatures who love us unconditionally. Your next amazing story is just one click away. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the truth has 4 legs and a tail, and love really can move mountains.